Hey guys, well, welcome back. So let's keep rolling with our unit on immunity. And last videos we covered our first and second lines of defense, which of course is going to be our innate immunity we're talking about up here. And for the rest of the rest of this unit, we're going to be talking about our acquired or adaptive specific immunity. So that's what we call our third line of defense, and this is what we're going to talk about for the rest of this unit down here. Our acquired immunity, which is going to be two different sections, our humoral response and the cell-mediated response. Okay, as again, I won't show you the videos during these tutorials, but definitely watch them when you're going through your notes by yourself. Okay, so like I mentioned just a second ago, we've already talked about our first line of defense. Those were our barriers. We talked about our second line of defense. Those were the things that were, of course, functional in everyone's immune system. Fever, our complements, our antimicrobial substances, inflammation, and so on. And today, for the rest of this unit, we're going to be talking about our third line of defense, which is our specific defense mechanisms. Now, when we're talking about our specific defense mechanisms, now we're moving into more precise things, and what we're going to worry about or talk about mostly are our lymphocytes. You know that a lymphocyte is a type of white blood cell. It makes up around 20 to 30% of the white blood cells in our blood, and you can find these lymphocytes in both the circulating blood, the lymph, and the interstitial fluids. And there's a picture here showing some lymphocytes in comparison to some red blood cells. Okay, when we're talking about lymphocytes, we're going to be talking about two different types. And right from the start, I tell you right now, it's very important to get your head around all the different types of cells we're going to be talking about in this unit. There's going to be a lot of different types of cells. They do a lot of different things, and it's important for you guys to get the function of those things straight, which will help you understand how all of this immune response comes together. Okay, so we're going to be talking about T cells and B cells. Now, both of these are lymphocytes. First, our T cells, those are lymphocytes that are made or born in the bone marrow, but they move to the thymus to mature. So thymus T cells, okay? The other ones that we're going to be talking about are our B cells. Now, these again are produced in the bone marrow, but they, instead of going to the thymus, they go to the spleen. So T cells and B cells, both are lymphocytes, both are huge parts of our acquired immune system, and they both do quite different things. So here is again a look at our different lymphocytes. We get our precursors here, so this is where both of them are born. They enter the bloodstream. The T cells will move into the thymus, and that's where they'll mature. The B cells move into the spleen, and they mature in the spleen. Both of these can circulate in the blood vessels. They can circulate in the lymph and in the interstitial fluid, and they all get returned to the blood vessels. But they come from the same place, they mature in different areas, and they have different roles to play. Okay, so what do our lymphocytes do? Well, our lymphocytes respond to, or when they respond, they create an immune response. And they respond to three general categories. First, they'll respond to invading pathogens. This could be bacteria, virus, it could be pathogens, it could be fungi, it could be anything. Okay, a pathogen, something that's going to make its way into your body to cause you disease, then our lymphocytes will respond to this. Another thing that they'll respond to are abnormal body cells. If you think about the billions of cells that we have in our body, not all of them are going to work perfectly all the time. Maybe there's a problem with one of them. Maybe one of them's not doing the things that it should. So our immune system recognizes that, and it'll also attack those cells in order to prevent them from causing any extra harm. So if you want to think about what type of cells they would be like cancer cells, for example. So those cells aren't doing what they're supposed to do. They're can cause you harm, so our immune system will attack them. Also, cells that have been attacked by a virus. So the virus enters the cells, our body recognizes that that's not a normal functioning cell, so the immune system, the lymphocytes, go after it and respond to it. And the third thing that they respond to are foreign proteins. So when we talked about bacteria types a couple of units back, we talked about how different bacteria can produce endotoxins and exotoxins. Well, that's an example of a foreign protein. Okay, if you get stung by a bee, for example, that's a toxin. Then you're going to have an immune response. Immediately, you'll get inflammation and swelling and stuff like that. So those are what the lymphocytes respond to. Now, when we get an immune response, whatever elicits or whatever makes that response happen, we call an antigen. Now, an antigen is typically thought of as something that is not self or foreign. So our immune system's big responsibility is to recognize something that isn't us. If you have our immune system attacking our own cells, then we get into trouble. That's called an autoimmune disorder. So a big thing or an important part of our immune system is recognizing what's self and what's not self. An antigen would be not self, and an antigen would cause an immune response. There's a lot of different ways that an antigen can be present. We can eat it, you can ingest it, it can be injected, and don't just think of a needle. You could walk and step on a piece of glass or something sharp and cut yourself, and then the pathogen, the antigen, gets into the cut. You can inhale, or it can be absorbed through the skin. These are all examples of how an antigen can be present in the body. And one of the things that one part of our acquired immune system will do is it will produce antibodies to defeat or defend against that antigen. And if we look over here on our picture, the antibodies are going to be the little purple lines, and we often draw antibodies in the shape of a Y, like that. And we'll talk more about antibodies later in this unit. And then our antigens are going to be the little tiny green thing here, and that could be anything that's going to cause an immune response. So anything we talked about on the last slide, a toxin, a pathogen, anything of that sort. Okay. Now, like I was saying earlier, not all foreign substances are antigenic. So not everything that gets introduced in our body is going to be an antigen that's going to cause an immune response. So, for example, if you break a glass and you try to clean it up and you accidentally cut yourself and you look and there's a little tiny piece of glass sticking out of your finger, our body's not going to recognize that as an antigen. It's not going to have an immune response against that piece of glass. The same thing if you were playing, or if you have a piece of wood in your hand and you get a splinter. The body's not going to recognize the splinter as an antigen. There has to be certain things that the body can recognize, and that's what we call an antigen. So something is antigenic. Antigenic means something that will cause an immune response. So an antigen is what causes an immune response. Antigenic is something that that could cause an immune response. So these are four things that make up kind of the loose definition of an antigen. First, it has to be foreign. So it has to be not self or not of our body. The second thing, it would have to be organic. The third part, it needs to be large, okay? And when we're talking about large, I don't mean like really, really big. I'm talking about molecularly big. So a high molecular weight is what we would consider a large antigen. And then finally, it needs to be structurally complex. One of the things that make a really good antigen is a protein, because it is structurally complex. It's organic. It can be well, it could definitely be foreign. We will recognize any proteins that don't belong in our body, and it's large. Okay, it's going to have a high molecular weight. So very often, antigens are proteins. But these are the four things that we would need to make up an antigen. Okay, so three properties of the adaptive immune system that separate it from the innate immune system. So what's special about our specific defenses compared to the ones that we're born with? Okay, and three major things that we have in our specific immune system is the fact that it is specific. Okay, and that's where it gets its name. It can distinguish self, which is what makes us up as a normal human being, a normal organism, from non-self. So organisms or particles or something that shouldn't be present. And an example of that is a new virus, a virus that we've never come in contact with. Let's call it SARS-CoV-2. Our body will recognize that new virus, even though it's never ever seen it before. The second thing is it will recognize self versus non-self. So again, our immune system doesn't attack normally functioning cells and tissues. If it does, then like I said, we'll have a big problem. We're moving into stuff called autoimmune disorders after that. And the third thing that's really special about this is that it has memory. So if you come in contact with a pathogen and we have an immune response, our immune system will remember that pathogen. And if you encounter that pathogen again, we already have all the tools in place to fight that pathogen, and you won't get as sick or even sick at all compared to the first time you encountered it. So think about if you've had chickenpox once and you rarely get it twice. That's because our immune system has memory. Okay, so for our specific immunity or acquired immunity, so we're going to have two immune responses. First, we're going to have our cell-mediated responses. And our cell-mediated responses or cell-mediated immunity, these are going to involve our T cells, okay? And they're going to attack intracellular foreign antigens. So intracellular foreign antigens means stuff that is inside cells, okay? The second response we're going to have is our antibody-mediated or our humoral immunity. This side of the immune response, is going to be handled by our B cells, and our B cells are going to synthesize antibodies, and we're going to talk more about that in a little while. And that's going to attack stuff that's extracellular, so that's going to be outside cells. So if we look down here really quickly, we've got our adaptive immunity. We get our T cells on this side, so we know this is going to be our cell-mediated immunity, and we can see that there's different cells produced to help us with that. And if we look down here, we see the B cells. That's going to be our humoral immunity, and we have a B cell that's created to carry out that response. Again, here's a little diagram. We start off here with our antigens, so we can see here we've got two viruses and a bacteria, just by the looks of it. That alerts our specific defenses. We move into our cell-mediated immunity. Those are going to produce cells that are going to directly attack not only the antigens, but also the cells that may be damaged by the antigens. The other branch of this is going to be our antibody-mediated immunity. Our B cells are going to produce antibodies, and those antibodies are going to attack the antigens. So we have a two-stage immune response, and both of them can contact each other back and forth here. And it's an extra, a buffer, an extra way for us to combat stuff that shouldn't be in our bodies to help us prevent us getting sick and attack disease. Now this slide, it's a little bit complicated right now, but I'm going to get back to this slide a little bit later in the unit when we've got a little bit more knowledge under our belts. And finally, have a look at this video, and hopefully it'll help explain some of the things I was just talking about. I'll see you guys in part B.